That's how it's done, son. That's how it's done, son. Killed it, man. Crowd was crazy. Is it always that wild on a Wednesday?
No, they seem pretty good out there.
I'm really stepping up my game. These bitches gotta start paying me for this. Can't get no more free, Randy. I just fucked that crowd in the ass.
Yeah.
It's just awesome. Just fucking BAM! Crowd me. BAM! Crowd me. My stand-up's my dick. Bang! You know?
I'm gonna do the same thing.
Okay, so this time we sit down. I'm actually curious. So whenever I sit down and watch TV or movies with the wife, she always gets mad at me because I come up with all these convoluted theories all the time.
Okay.
And what it is that because I always wanted to either write or direct or be involved in some way in a creative process like this, I'm trying to picture what people were thinking while they were directing or while they wrote something. Mm-hmm. And that's where all these crazy theories come from. So I'm curious, do you experience this? Because your background's in film. You have your degree in that. You've been partially in it. I mean, it's true. That's more than most people who, sit down.
On the record, my college experience was 4 years of summer camp at a location that shall not be named because it's heavily politicized at the moment.
But at the very least, you have studied film in
yeah.
what is an accredited university to some degree.
Yeah, I do get that feeling all the time. In fact, lately, I don't know if it's due to overconsumption of media or maybe even my age. I'm recently 30, but I feel like reading into that process, reading into what went into making the product is in some ways more fascinating to me than the actual product itself.
Right.
And speculating on the undocumented aspects of some of these things, looking at the way certain shots were done or the way certain edits were done and postulating on why did they do that? Somebody made a conscious decision. Movies don't get made by themselves.
Right.
In fact, they get made by hundreds of people working in tandem. But the point is, there is some sort of agency behind all of these little choices, and it is always fascinating to think that everything you're seeing is intentional to some degree.
In fact, I just saw somebody posted a photo of the opening sequence in John Wick 2,
Okay.
where it was showing the cars.
Yeah.
That out in front of the hotel, and they had the exact same cars lined up in the same parking space because at the end of the first movie, that's what it kind of ends with, and the second one's supposed to take place right at that beginning. Mm-hmm. Even though it was filmed years apart, somebody still had that on file to know to get that shot orchestrated. It's little things like that are insane. I would never think of that, but in this master vision, that was important. So
Well, a lot of it is, internet culture and whatnot. Everything's under a magnifying glass now, so it's easier than if you wanted a refresher on the end of the first John Wick movie, all you'd have to do is Google it or YouTube it, and you could find it easy. Anybody, not the people in charge of the production, anybody. So I think continuity people have been in the film industry as long as it's existed.
Yeah.
I think those people are probably paid a lot better now, and there are probably much more of them.
Yes.
In fact, in some ways, you could almost argue that Kevin Feige, are you familiar with him?
No, I can't say that I am.
Okay. He's the man leading the charge for the Marvel films.
Mm-hmm.
He's the singular entity that's been appointed to curate this whole entire media franchise.
You had actually mentioned him before when we were talking about Zack Snyder, and that being one of his flaws is that he was a director trying to take on that similar thing.
It sounded in the beginning, they were fingering him to do both. But
right
now, since Batman versus Superman, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, they've brought in Jeff Johns, who is much better qualified because that was his job. He's a comics writer. His job is to juggle continuity.
Right.
And Kevin Feige does, as far as I know, he isn't a comics author, but basically he's an executive, I think an executive producer, that his entire job is to make sure all these independent film productions line up.
Right.
Make sure that Daredevil and Jessica Jones and the Defender shows on Netflix line up aesthetically and thematically with the Marvel movies, and make sure that the new Inhuman show and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show that nobody gives a shit about. Like, make sure that it all jives with each other. So,
yeah, and that's fascinating too. Like, just when you're mentioning all these, like, it's amazing how they're kind of attacking every audience in a different way.
Oh,
where it's like,
yeah.
it's like you got your Netflix, which are generally going to be like kind of people in our age range, where it's like, well, fuck it, I don't need to pay for cable. So I have this. But then you also got to have to go the network TV route to get the old people. And,
Yep. the JAG folks.
Yeah, exactly. So, and, not to mention like all children's toys and all that, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the
Marvel.
things that don't get talked about, like, well, at least in my social circles, are like the cartoons and stuff. Like, I didn't remember that there was an Avengers cartoon in the past 10 years or so. And there was a Guardians of the Galaxy cartoon. And for a while, though, they had that Disney Infinity toy line that was like the Skylanders toys, where it's a virtual toy kind of.
Well, and even that, like, I do remember, like, it was interesting, like, for instance, when we were kids, we had Batman, we had X-Men, the cartoons, but I remember it was funny because, like, those came about and I had no idea what was actually going on in them, and it confused the shit out of me because all we had for introduction were old comics.
Yeah.
Where things were completely different by the time the TV shows came around. And now you're seeing a lot of, like, the themes that were big in those cartoons are actually now the basis for the plots of these movies. And,
yeah. I mean, the X-Men cartoon, like in the early 90s when we were watching it on Fox Kids, most of those stories were from, like, the Chris Claremont era from, like, the 70s and the 80s, like, prior to all that. Mm-hmm. But then they kind of made it all gel together where they, instead of Shadowcat, they had Jubilee, because Jubilee was the 90s character.
Right.
And it, you're always shooting for a certain audience. And what I think is really funny about the way, like, the crossover type scenarios were done back in the day, like with the Spider-Man cartoon and the X-Men cartoon, which were both aired, around the same time. I don't think they were the same animation studio, though.
Okay.
It may have been that a production group owned both the rights to those characters or something, but those characters actually jumped onto each other's show. Like, Spider-Man did get some Avengers on his show.
Yeah.
And the X-Men did guest star on his show with the same voice actors and everything. But it was very clearly done by a different animation studio, and it looked really weird, and it didn't look right. But now that they have that massive creative control over everything, like, you can have Captain America show up in your Spider-Man movie, and he will be played by Chris Evans, and he will be wearing the exact same costume. And it's just a well-oiled machine.
It really is. And that kind of, like, last time we got together, we were discussing, like, Transformers movies. And I feel like the Marvel Universe is kind of like, you can't ever master it, but right now they have it just going. Like, it's like you said, it's a well-oiled machine. It's like everything they're pumping out, there's purpose behind it. And it's curating an audience in a way that surprisingly is still entertaining. Yeah. Despite being so much all at once. I mean, it's really insane. And that's what I guess is interesting, where then you have, like, the more indie stuff, I would say. Yeah. Or not even indie, but just like things that don't have, like, a canon to them, like original ideas, I guess, for shows. Those are the ones that, like, I guess I'm always intrigued by, because I'm always trying to gauge, it's like, is this person, like, how much of this is their real self being delivered to me? I mean, I guess specifically, like, I watch a lot of shows about comedians. Okay. And a lot of comedians, especially now, like, the big thing is you got to be real, you got to be honest, like, kind of the Louis C.K. thing, like, you need to always be talking about your real life experiences and be a genuine person. Those are the moments that you see beauty in life and blah, 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 Yeah. So it makes you very, scrutinize as you're watching these things, like, very much, like, is this person delivering to me, an accurate depiction of their life? Like, what are they really trying to say underneath it all? Mm-hmm. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, I've been watching that Master and None show. Okay.
Aziz Ansari?
Yeah, and he's very funny. And there are some episodes of that I'll say are absolutely amazing. Like, he truly, like, has a voice that's important, I think. He does, like, it's one of the only shows I've ever seen where he discusses being a child of immigrants, That's important, But at the same time as I'm watching it, it's like, you have a sex scene with Claire Danes. It's nice. Like, Aziz is my age. Like, that Romeo and Juliet movie was a big fucking deal.
No kidding.
And the MTV show she was on, too, before that. That's probably one of those, like, all-time crushes for this guy.
Yeah, that's probably a bucket list thing.
That's what I mean. It's like little things like that where it's like...
when you really think about it, that's kind of an obscure actress, too. Like, she's not like a headliner, like a mainstream, like, super popular actress.
You see what I mean?
But
it's kind of like, it's like
specific.
This kind of subconsciously, you're going to think I'm a really cool guy if I write this in here.
Well, I mean, what that reeks of is, like, you know, he was talking to the casting director. He was like, no, you should call that Claire Danes lady. What's she up to?
Exactly. And then, like, in the second season in particular, it gets really interesting because there's, like, a scene where he has his character written in, and it's, like I said, it's a well-written show.
Okay. I've read his book, by the way.
Oh, yeah. No, I know. That's why part of the reason we're discussing, because like I said, we're trying to get into the mindset of this comedian.
I'm just letting you know, I haven't seen his material, but I have read his book.
So, in the second season, he ends up writing it in so his character goes and eats at the third best restaurant on Earth, basically.
Okay.
In this tiny little town in Italy. Which is fine. That's cool.
Yeah.
You know, again, it's like if you've reached a point where your voice is being heard, you're allowed to do these things. I have no problem with that. What's fascinating about it is that same chef who runs that restaurant has like 4 other specials on Netflix.
Oh.
You see where I'm going with that? Where it's kind of like, it's like, how much of this is genuine that you had a thought that was interesting and beautiful and you wanted to showcase this guy's food? Because apparently in that scene, like, I haven't seen all of the episodes, and I haven't seen this, but I have read that they did film his genuine reactions to him enjoying the food.
Oh, yeah.
Which is cool. Like, yeah. That's, again...
I would think you have to. I think the chef would be pissed.
Exactly. But at the same time, it's kind of like, how much of that was put in because he wanted it in there, and how much of that was put in because we want to cross-promote his stuff to all the rest of our Netflix audience.
That's tough.
And that's where these are the things, like I said, these are the crazy theories that like my wife hates when I go off on these tangents.
These are the crazy theories that keep me single. Like, no, I was just thinking about this the other day that I mean, not to constantly be shitting on Netflix, but just when you think of data mining and just subscription services of any kind or any kind of account that you hold, like with, be it Amazon or Netflix or what have you, they have some of your personal data. Yeah. They're not allowed to do, well, we don't know what they're allowed to do with it exactly, but point is, habits. They collect habits. And all these services like Netflix, every time you give a rating to something, it's stored somewhere.
Yes.
And it accumulates.
Yes.
And so basically they're taking the Nielsen rating system and they're improving upon it 100-fold.
Yeah.
So they have every one of their users feeding them ideas for new content. Like, their audience is telling them what they want.
Right.
And that was always my fear with I don't know, subsisting on a diet of media that's been served up to me. It's like, sometimes you want something with an off flavor. Sometimes you want something that isn't quite palatable. That's how you find new things. That's how you expand your horizons. But if you rely on this system to just give you what you want constantly, yeah, you'll always get good shit, but maybe it won't be exactly the shit you're looking for. But yeah, the cross-promotion shit, I would not doubt that a lot of that was slipped in there to promote that chef, or maybe that chef's specials were doing really well, and maybe Aziz Ansari's show wasn't doing as well, so they were like, how can we bolster both of these at the same time?
Well, and like, I'm not trying to shit on Aziz, like, I just more so that's like one of the highest rated shows right now. Like, it's probably going to win a bunch of awards. Like, it's considered to be an excellent TV show, and it is for the most part.
Okay.
But like I said, at the same time, there are parts of it where I look at it and it's like, how much of this is a show that's like a beautiful, genuinely thought out thing? And there's times where I'm watching it and it just feels like you're just trying to make yourself look like the coolest dude on earth, because a lot of your shtick has to do with being single and, in the big city or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And now you're just going to have people crawling out of the woodwork wanting to spend time with you because you dine at the best of restaurants. You're always at the coolest bars. You have this very worldly perspective. The fact that your character up and just moves to this tiny town to learn how to hand make pasta in Italy. you know, and dines at the third best restaurant in the world, you know?
No, I mean, that's straight out of any indie rom-com. I mean, that's a lost in translation, basically, or what have you. Just like,
Yeah.
Go off to mystical, far-off land that, you know, people actually live in. But, you know, you're an outsider, so everything's magical and special. And it's like...
Well, not to ruin it, but like the second season, basically, he meets a gal in this small town, then she comes to New York with her fiance.
Oh.
But the fiance is always busy at work, and her and Aziz are always going off to these crazy...
I did mention Lost in Translation, right?
Yeah. No, and they go off to all these wonderful, beautiful places in New York, you know, that never have anyone around them. It's always just the two of them. It's like one of the most populated cities on Earth, but regardless. So they're always going off, having these wonderful, beautiful dates, but they're not together. And then it kind of ends with her choosing him over the fiance when there's literally a scene where Aziz yells at her, "You used me! You used me!" It's like, when has that ever worked, by the way? Like, I don't think there's ever been an instance known to man where known in humanity where a man has yelled at a woman, "You've been using me," and then she decides to sleep with him.
Like, you're perfect. I must have you.
Like, I'm not going to go out and say he's a nice guy, you know, that new archetype, but it just kind of, I think what he was going for was like the wholesome thing where it's like, because that's kind of one of those things people are saying these days, like people feel like the world is too dark all the time, and Seinfeld was kind of in comedy the peak of that, where it's like everything's negative, these are shitty people.
It's a very cynical show, but put forth in a very, I don't know, comedic package.
Right, but then you compare that to the shows that followed it, which were things like the American Office, where it took like Ricky Gervais's, which again is kind of a like sour with uplifting moments type of show, to one that the American Office, where everyone's singing, everyone's kooky, everything's like, you know, at the end of the day it all works out kind of a show. And it was kind of bringing back this wholesome Glee culture we're in now, where everything's happy, everything's good, you know.
Well, I mean, this is kind of a tangent, but like I feel like that saccharine quality is actually part of what contributes to, you know, people being depressed. It's just like, you know, having a social media account. It's like you're constantly being bombarded with images of people who are doing life better than you.
Oh, of course. Everyone's on vacation. So, everyone's hiking.
I don't know this Master of None show, but like the way the second season is being described to me, it sounds like I said, an extended rom-com.
Yeah.
So it's like, it'll help you get laid tonight. But after 13 hours of this shit, you're probably going to feel pretty shitty about your relationship in comparison to this one that is apparently a bond so strong you can yell, "You used me!" and she sticks with you.
Well, and I don't know. I guess I was a little offended, like, where it's like, you're talking about this gal who grows up in a different country, you know, where you're going to come to New York and be blown away by it, you know, and the fact that you meet some guy has the free time and willingness and money to show you everything the city has to offer. Like, it's just kind of a bizarre thing, and that your fiance is so trusting and caring that he allows you to go off with said guy. And
I mean, I don't know the tone of the show, because like I could see this like if it had like a tone like My Big Fat Greek Wedding or something, where it's almost hyper real at times.
Yeah.
Like that, to me, that's fine. That's acceptable. That's like your traditional rom-com justification, where it's like sometimes you just want to feel good. Like sometimes you don't want to think about the way things really are, and you just want to watch a good story and feel good about it.
Well, and the one thing I will say too is, again, because I'm not going to completely shit on the guy, because there are some episodes that are just brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, you prefaced everything by
yeah,
saying
no,
really
again,
well-written.
I mean, that's the whole thing when you're throwing these thoughts out there. Like, I don't want to ever just say like shit on this guy, because he's accomplished something that one day I would love to say that I could even get a fraction of.
Hey, I mean, I always say, look at my shelf. I'm an expert at polishing turds. Like,
yeah, no, so it's, you know, not gonna shit on the guy. And the one thing I will say that I am intrigued about is how he's gonna follow up this second season, because again, like I said, to me it just came across as kind of saying like, I'm trying to get laid and this is my perfect woman archetype, and you know, if you're out there, you know, I'm available. But that being said, the way it kind of ends, like, it's also kind of set up where maybe he intentionally wrote his character to be a shitty guy, and maybe the whole next season's going to just be him getting his comeuppance.
Could be.
And if that's the case, then it's actually a brilliant season, because that is kind of like, you kind of made, in the show, he does make some shitty decisions, and he kind of aligns himself with some fucked up people, and so it hints at that.
No, I mean, if they go that route, well, let me put it to you this way. If they didn't go that route, would you feel like betrayed or disappointed?
I would say that I would hate the next season.
Okay.
If the next season is just him like falling in love passionately with this person, I would absolutely hate it and probably not watch it.
Given the nature, like, how many episodes a season?
I believe it's 12.
12,
but like
usually it's
I
like
think
12
like
to 13.
It's like 12, and I believe like 3 or 4 of them a season don't directly involve him.
Well,
like they're either scenes about side characters or things,
Well, I mean, drama is conflict. I would not expect them to be a couple throughout the entirety of those 12 episodes. So yeah. I'm sure. I haven't watched the show, but I'm guessing there's going to be a hiccup in the road because, like I said, it sounds like an extended rom-com where it's like a 30-hour rom-com instead of a 2-hour one.
And you said you've read his book, and isn't a big part of his book kind of discussing like trying to date and being single in this current internet culture?
Yeah, that's the whole thesis of the book.
Right. And so that's kind of, again, it's not directly explicitly stated in the show, but the other side to it is that maybe this guy really has been having a very difficult time in dating and whatnot. I imagine it gets harder the bigger you get too, like as a celebrity, and maybe it's becoming one of those things where he just wanted to write out his like beautiful ideal romance that probably is a fleeting thought.
Maybe.
I mean,
obviously he has a lot of thoughts on the subject, so maybe that's like his magnum opus, like this is my treatise on romance in the modern era.
Exactly. And I guess that's what's so interesting about it, is it's like, while there's this emphasis on everything needs to be real, everything needs to be genuine, at the same time you reach a point where it's like, well, to keep it entertaining, it can't be.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a hang up a lot of us get, where it's like, at what point is every detail important? At what point can you switch things to make it more interesting or tell a bigger tale than what you're actually going for? Because I think that people, when you're telling stories, when you can see a bad storyteller, they're the ones, they get so locked into like dumb, inane details.
Yeah.
And those are the people you just kind of shut off because you're just listening to them rant and rave. I mean, there's probably somebody doing that right now, But that's one of those things. It's like, how do you edit things, or how do you tell tell the essence of what you're trying to do without actually, being 100% accurate sometimes.
Well, yeah, I was actually mentioning this the other day. I was eavesdropping on a conversation, and they were talking about Interstellar and Gravity, and somebody asked me like which one did you like better, Trevor? And my answer was, I didn't really love either one. Like, they're, from an audiovisual standpoint, both were amazing. Absolutely, on a technical level, they're incredible. But in terms of storytelling, I was thinking, it's all right. But the one guy was trying to drive home the schmaltzy aspects of Gravity, and I was like, my response to that was, it almost felt like magical realism, like the type of writing where it's
right.
There's a pretty clear point in the movie where it becomes clear that this isn't entirely reality. I don't think I was meant to swallow all of the small details and all the science of the story.
Right.
I was meant to focus on, maybe the lady who's in every fucking shot of the movie, and it's her story. And she's thrust in front of your face throughout the entire thing. So if you use her as your anchor and you focus purely on her, yeah, it's a fine story that happens to take place in space, where science apparently means more than on Earth. And kind of the same with Interstellar, where it's like, I thought it was even more schmaltzy and more over the top with some of the emotional angles they were playing towards the end of it.
Well, like we've discussed many times, I don't think the Nolan boys do emotions that well.
I think Christopher Nolan might be on the spectrum. I think he's the kind of guy that somebody throws some script notes at you. You lay down some script notes about some emotional beats in the story. He's like, oh, we don't need those. He's like, let me go play with my camera for a while. It's like, well, let me mess with the diopter. It's like, yeah, he seems like he's more into the technicals and editing and things of that nature, not not like emotional storytelling and like finding where characters are in their time off screen and things like it. It seems like he's more interested in what makes it to the finished product.
Well, I think part of that too, honestly, is just there's some people that can see scale.
Oh yeah.
Like I mean, hell, a good example, like we're in Seattle, like the land of Jeff Bezos, you know, or Bill Gates and things like Paul Allen, you know. Like these are guys that like their world is so big that like there are certain things they just don't really need to take into account as much as when your world is smaller, like emotions and things like that probably are more important to you. You know, being more, you know, that is kind of how it seems, at least to me. It's like I see constantly where the people who seem to like thrust emotions out into the public and, you know, really be like, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, generally are kind of the people who have like shitty jobs or like, you know, and when you're on that bigger scale, you just kind of, have so many things on your mind that you kind of almost have to deaden emotion and things like that. Like, that's just my theory.
It makes sense. It's, you know, winning the war, not the battle.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like you can't
put an emotion on every life lost.
Exactly. Right? That's exactly where I was going with that, where it's kind of like, you know, when you're on that level, you don't take the time to really think about the janitor or like, you know, things like that. You make sure they're taken care of by your various accountants and all that, but that's about the extent of your thought towards that. And I think Nolan, he does these giant movie projects where, you know, he probably doesn't get a lot of those moments where he's interacting with the kid who's bringing him coffee every day. Like, you know, he's not on that level. He's on a level where this is so big, there's so much money tied in it, and I'm managing so many huge actors. Like, you know, and I'm not doing one of these green screen jerk off fests. Like, it's like a full on production.
Well, and it's funny. I mean, we started this off talking about like thinking about the license, the agency that goes into putting films together and telling stories and things like that. And like Nolan is one of those guys that he's like from the old guard. Like he's a fairly young director, you know, by any standard, but like he's one of the only guys I know who still believes in like the magic, like the art of cinema.
Well,
like,
I think anyone I think like, not to cut you off here, but I was just going to say, like, I feel like one of the things I've been noticing a lot, especially with what people consider hipsters these days, is like if you want to master a craft, you kind of have to go back to understanding the entirety of it. It's like you can't just master like what's here and now. Like you also need to go back and really fully like appreciate and understand where it came from. Like you see it a lot with chefs now, where everything is like, we want to go back to the farming, we want to go back to understanding what your food ate, and you know, ensure that it's the greatest of the great. And because if you just focus on modern things, you can perfect stuff, but if you really get the essence of it, then you have passion behind it. You know, at least I work in, you know, restaurants, so I see more of this shit. Like I see it with craft cocktails and all that. That's like all these big time bartenders, that's their whole thing. We want to harken back to the days before Prohibition, and you know, when everyone was making bathtub gin and stuff like that. It's like if you can master that, then you really get the essence and the love of it. And that's why I see with a guy like Nolan.
I mean, I've talked about this pretty much every time we've turned on this microphone, but I feel like it's this realness movement. Like I feel like reaching for realness and like genuineness is kind of what people are trying to grasp these days. It seems to be not only like the popular option, like the thing that people get applauded for. Like you see all sorts of fucking weirdos on the internet that get applauded for being weirdos on the internet because they're not afraid to be a weirdo on the internet.
Yeah.
Because they embrace like a Lady Gaga type person who is actually way ahead of this. Like I'm talking in like maybe the past 5 years, but she was before all this. Like the whole concept of showing up in a public space dressed however the fuck that you want to call that, and just purely embracing it. And I think people latch onto that, and it's always going to be an attractive quality in any person to be comfortable in your own skin.
Well, and yes, but I also think in her case, like she was mimicking Madonna.
Yeah, I mean, so you got to get your foot in the door somehow.
And I think that, like, I guess going to your point with the realness factor, I think the problem when you're seeing these uber celebrities like people like Lady Gaga, the issue with it is now that they can hire a style coach who will tell them this is the dress or wear that's going to pop at this event. It's like you can curate any of these people to be.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, though. Is like she was before.
Yeah.
Now, though, I think what you're seeing is backlash.
Yes.
Where people are very wise to that, and now like you have like reverse curated like social media where you're almost like peeling back the layers and almost like dressing yourself down, like figuratively speaking, I guess. But I think that's part of where the whole like artisanal thing comes from.
Yeah.
Is I don't know, getting away from artifice. And I feel like guys like Nolan, that's part of what makes their work attractive. Is you get the sense that he is such a precise tool that the product that you're getting is the product that he wanted you to get.
Right.
And despite having, major studio backing, like, Warner Brothers fucking loves him because he's made them billions of dollars, but like all of his movies, you can tell they're his movie. And if you look at like the special features on almost any of his movies, there's nothing. Like he doesn't give you anything.
Well, and I know we've discussed this over over the process of recording these too, but like I also believe that maybe he just speaks the language that producers like big time money backers like really appreciate. Like I think that like with him, it's like more focused on being able to have a precise budget, things like that. Like I think that there's a certain prestige with knowing you're hiring him and you're getting the best, basically. And compared to like taking a chance with some young director that may flame out, or some guy that is being propped up by a really big director, but you have no idea what direction he's going to go. Perfect example of that's who's the District 9 guy?
Oh, Neill Blomkamp.
Yeah, who has made some really interesting things, and now he's kind of doing his own indie production company deal. And it's so fascinating to see, like, maybe that was the reason why when Peter Jackson was, like, kind of touting this guy as, like, the next big thing to studios, and they all kind of rejected him. Like, maybe it's because they got the sense of, like, this guy's not going to play by our rules. Like, he's going to push it, and he's going to...
Look what happened with Chappie, where it's like, if you're not South African, or you don't know... I forget the name. If you don't know the band who is basically the center of the film, like you're going to be lost.
Well, and that actor Ninja, I guess, was his second pick for the Elysium movie before that.
Yeah, and I can see that.
And before that, it was supposed to be Eminem. And actually, I think it would have been a better movie if it were Eminem, just because he represents more that type of character. Like he, seems like a guy who came from a rough town, which...
Yeah, as far as I understand, Neill Blomkamp's movies have always been like a curiosity, where District 9 made a lot of money as far as I know, but like Elysium and Chappie, not as much. But like aesthetically and in terms of presentation, they're just so interesting and different that there's something there. But yeah, as a producer, that's a gamble. That's not a sure bet.
But see, that's what I'm saying. Is like then versus hiring a guy like Nolan that shows up on time to all the production meetings, and
I have arrived.
Yes,
I have a script.
I mean, because you think about it, it's like that's what a producer is. You're an investor, and you have, as an investor, you have to look at it and say like, how much do I trust this person to guarantee me a return on my investment? And so I think that maybe Neill is one of those guys who. He's real as fuck when it comes to his movies, but that's not necessarily a good thing when you're wanting to make money. And I think even with Aziz, too, maybe that's the case, like where he's one of those guys that, like, he understands when Netflix says, hey, we have an opportunity to implement this chef into your show to help cross-promote our brand. Can you make that work, and are you willing to? And he can, he found a way to make it entertaining, and like I said, it's getting all sorts of accolades. So, to his credit,
it's not really related to what he's saying, but I think it's interesting. It may just be me being kind of detached from it, because I haven't really watched much stand-up comedy or followed too many stand-up comedians in a long time. I used to be kind of in on it, but not anymore. But I feel like I feel like the style of comedy these days is much more autobiographical than it used to be. Where I think it stems from social media, where there's a lot more access. Where if Eddie Murphy was a successful comedian right now, you would know every goddamn thing about Eddie Murphy and his upbringing and his family, everything. Right. You would know what he's doing on a Tuesday. And I feel like that translates to people's acts, is that they're not just selling an act, they're not selling the product, they're selling themselves.
Yeah.
Like Aziz Ansari is a very affable, socialite. He's a young single guy, and that's part of his act, but it's also part of the brand that you're buying into.
Well, and one of the things too, like he's very kind of big on kind of mentioning in his show is that like he gets a lot of his roles because he represents, an Indian guy on TV.
Yeah.
And so that's a cool thing. Like that's because, unfortunately there's a lot of casting that gets done with that shit in mind, It's like we need to cover all our bases, It's like, but I agree with you. I think that too, like that's why I like Marc Maron so much, because he actually was kind of one of the founders of that whole real comedy movement.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what killed his career early on, because people would go to a show and be like, this isn't funny. You're literally just talking about your day. But now you see like all these guys where Louis was the one that kind of really stormed through and made all the big bucks off of it. And all of his projects are always focused on like, this is how shitty life can be, or like, this is what the real world looks like, beyond just, glitz and glamour. Like, and Maron too, like Maron, his whole career is just kind of him talking about his shit, what's going on.
It sounds like a therapy session.
Yes,
where he's
exactly.
He's working shit out in a comedic fashion.
Well, and that's why I like him so much, because
I think
it feels genuine every time like you listen to him. Like every conversation actually feels like you're getting 100% of him.
Well, he speaks with the voice of a man who has some miles on him, who's done some shit,
and has been humbled by life.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating to hear, and I think he presents it well.
Yeah,
but, like. Another thing I was thinking about comedians and brands and things like that was I keep hearing this phrase thrown around on like other podcasts and things like that there are more active comedians in the US than ever before, and I believe it.
Yes.
But I was thinking about it, and like it dawned on me, like I hadn't thought of this before, but I was like, Twitter.
Yes.
I was like, Twitter. Like when you think about the character limitations and the immediacy of Twitter, it's like you're teaching yourself how to make quips.
Yep.
Something happened in the world. I need to say something with 100 characters that's funny right now.
Yep.
And then you compile enough tweets and you have an act.
Well,
and I think that gave way to a lot of young comedians.
I think it's part that. I think more what it is, honestly, is we're in a weird stage where rock and roll is kind of like a joke. And I mean, there will always be some bands that come around, but
I can't name one.
Well, there's that, but most of it, I think, is just like because rock and roll always thrived off of pissing off your parents.
Yeah.
Like the best bands are always the ones doing something completely opposite of what their parents liked. And now the problem is parents are loving and accepting. So like your kids, you're not going to be pissed if your kid announces he's making a punk band.
Yeah.
Like, you're actually going to be supportive and, like, hope he gets successful and know that he could actually do really well for himself if that takes off, Mm-hmm. That's why I think you're seeing so many of these, like, rappers now. Like, I think rap is the new punk rock. Like,
yeah, I would agree with that.
Because that pisses off a lot of, like, stuffy old rich white parents.
And it's the counterculture thing, too. Like, yeah. I mean, not to be inflammatory or anything, but the people who seem to know all the lyrics to all the rap songs are skinny white girls.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like they're the biggest fans out of everyone I know.
Well, and the other thing, too, I think people are realizing if they do the research, but, like, almost every comedian I've ever actually looked in their background, like, their parents are usually pretty wealthy, which makes it a hell of a lot easier to throw yourself into a career where you may flame out and make no money.
Yeah.
Or to go to a show in a big city where it's expensive as fuck to live.
Yeah.
And just try to make that work. Like, in my life, I can't fathom that, Like, that's a terrifying prospect to, like, just go 100% into something.
That doesn't compute.
Yeah, but if, like, we came from a background where financially we knew we were set.
Yeah.
or just never had to grow up really thinking about money, you might be willing to pursue some more interests in like that. And I think you see that a lot with actors. I think you see that a lot with, well, actors, a lot of time you're just born into the connections.
Yeah.
But like comedians especially, I think a lot of that are, you get these kids who know that they're financially secure, so why the fuck not?
Yeah.
You know, you get to do a job where you just go talk about your day all day long.
No, I could see that. That, and, you know, again, social media, it, like, if you get good at it, air quotes,
Yeah.
like, you get that sense of, like, fulfillment. Like, you get that positive reinforcement that's like, oh, yeah, I'm good at this. And then you convince yourself that you're good at it. And maybe you are. But
Well,
I think it's funny that, you know, I'm sure there were a lot of older comedians from previous generations that I'm sure their comedy came as a survival instinct, where it's like, if you're the funny guy, nobody's gonna hit you.
You mean the Jews?
Hey, you snuck it in there. We're members of the tribe. It's okay.
No, but I'm dead serious. Like that, I think that was a reason why, like, that came about. That was a big thing in comedy. It was like,
it's like, hey, you're
survival mechanism. Yeah.
It's like, hey, I hate your people, but you're all right. You make me laugh.
No, I mean, these are one of those things, like, I saw this hilarious meme. You know, I hate saying that out loud, but I saw this hilarious meme that it was right after that horrible thing went down in Virginia, where it was just like, in response to that, this guy had put out, and he says, like, oh, the reaction of white America, which is this, like, I can't believe this is happening in my country. And then it just, like, is a picture of this young black kid giving, like, a side eye and just being like, yeah, like, it's been going on for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality of it, like, we're not part of the religion, you know. But the reality, our father was raised Catholic to bury his Jewish roots. That's how bad it was when he was a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, these are things that are instilled in us and passed along, and that's why we bring it up a lot. And so, yeah, to speak to that, I can imagine that you would have to try to make yourself as lovable as possible.
No, really, though. I mean, it doesn't matter what background you're from. If you can make people laugh, the chances of them wanting to hit you or something are much less.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, you know, tons of comedians, not even because of those social issues, just like coming from a broken-ass home. Like, hey, maybe dad won't fucking smack me if I make him chuckle or something.
No, I mean, our father had a tough home life, and I know that, like, he kind of has that personality, and a lot of that came from trying to cheer up everyone.
He's the guy that, you know, is hurt or sick or whatever, and first instinct is make everyone laugh.
Yeah.
And it's like when he's lowest is when he pushes other people up.
Yeah. No, and that's, I know that carried over. It's one of the recurring things we talk about too, is like, he was in the military, and I know that that's how he kind of endeared himself, and that's like the stuff that probably kept him going through serving in Vietnam.
I'm sure.
And, you know, that was always something I kept in mind too, like when, you know, I was young and thought I was going to go in the service, because in the 80s they were brainwashing you too. But, exactly. But I always assumed I'd go into the service, and that was always something I carried with me, is like, you know, be the funny guy. Like, you know, the funny guy always survives in the war movies. Like, it's like everyone likes the funny guy. Like,
sometimes it's the first guy to get it.
Sometimes.
You're there, he's the guy that misses the chopper at the end.
This is true.
It's like, if you want to send the audience home on a somber note, that's how you do it. It's
That's
like,
also
but he was the funny guy. It's like, why did you have to shoot Michael J. Fox?
No, but I was going to say with the comedian thing, like, I think I agree with you. I think Twitter's a huge part of it. I think that being the funny guy is something everyone wants to be. And also, I think it pisses off your parents. Like, if your parents are doctors, and then you just say, I'm going to go stand up here and talk about things.
Yeah, I'm going to... Well, I mean, especially now, where, again, with the social media and stuff, it used to be, you know, Well, I mean, being a comedian is always such a, like, living out of a suitcase kind of job, where you're constantly struggling for gigs. Usually you have a job on the side, especially in the beginning. Like, there's no way you can just do that right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, the route is, like, if you start to have some success with that, then you transition into something else. And oftentimes that peters out, and you end up going back to stand-up, which, again, doesn't carry many guarantees.
Well,
but
yeah.
More and more, though, you see, like, like guys going on tour, but it's more than a tour. It's like a virtual tour at the same time, because they're, you know, shooting out like social media shit while they're like in exotic locations. Like, hey, they invited me to go to Australia. Here's Australia.
I think too. Like the other thing is,
you're basically becoming a public figure who doesn't act every once in a while.
Well, and the other thing about it too that's fascinating is, I guess, it's they're so loyal to one another. Like if you establish, like if you do the work and if you show up all the time and you keep working at it, like these people take you under your wing. Like you saw it all the time on Seinfeld, how many young comedians had bit parts on that show.
Everyone.
And now even like, you know, you see it with Louis, you see it with Maron, you see all these guys, like they're very much trying to carry and lift up those, you know, who don't have the success that they have, or, you know, sometimes being pulled up by people who have more success than them, you know. And that's a beautiful thing to see. It's a very community thing. I guess one of my issues with it is like, I stopped watching stand-up when it started to get into that, just like, I'm just going to go up here and say the most shocking bullshit ever.
Oh, okay.
Like the fucking Tosh.0 guy. Like he, you know.
See, I've never seen his act. Like, I've seen clips from his show, but not like an actual stand-up routine.
Yeah, I mean, look, these are people who can be funny, but like, I've never really liked that concept of like, you have to defend every comedian's jokes. Like, there are certain things I just don't see why we have to joke about. But there's always going to be somebody who feels the need and the desire that we know we need to like make a joke about sexual assault. It's like, why?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
It's like, is
that's what you're going to hang your hat on?
Yeah, it's like,
That I'm the one who's fearless enough that I'm going to try to make a joke about this? Like, I get, like I said, it's that whole free speech thing, and you got to defend the person's right to try to find humor in everything. But that was the thing that really put me off, was it just felt like you're just getting so much of this shit where it's like...
Not to bring everything back to wrestling, but I feel that everything eventually does come back to wrestling.
I would agree
I
with
have
that.
compared the Marvel Universe to wrestling, and the success of the Marvel Universe to wrestling, because they are in fact the same fucking thing. But I don't know, I feel like especially in things like comedy that are very generational, like, I feel like things come in waves.
Yeah.
And that was probably like the crest of a wave. Where it's like, hey, we've tried every trick in the book. Let's go nuts and just throw the book out the window and see if it sticks. It's like, oh wait, it didn't. So then the wave comes crashing down and we begin anew. It's like the John Cena effect, where it's like, fuck, I hate this John Cena guy. He sucks. He's for little kids. Oh, wait, this John Cena guy works really hard, and he's good with the cancer kids. Fuck, now I really love this John Cena guy, and it's been 10 years, and I've been staring at him all this time.
No, you're totally right, because honestly, that was like right when that whole like frat type of humor was like all the rage. Like that was when like sites like College Humor and things like that were first getting set up. That's when like what was it, that awful writer Tucker Max was
Tucker
like all
Max.
the rat. He wrote this book that's just basically stories about him getting drunk and all his sexual escapades, and it was like the big thing of like all these like college kids were passing his book around and be like, this guy's the greatest bro of all time. And so I mean that's most of that stuff. And then people started calling him on it and be like, you just wrote a story that's literally you having sex with a passed out girl, you know. And be like, yeah, but I was wasted when it happened. It's like, why did you write that?
Yeah, like, it's like, why did you share that? It's like, do you not have a lawyer?
Yeah, no, so but that's, again, it's at a certain point it's like, okay, fuck off. Like,
no, I feel like that was like a very raw moment in time, where it's like it's a transition moment, I guess, where it's like now we're getting a more tempered version of that, where it's like, yeah, they're young idiots on social media and stuff like that, but they've seen how those other guys fucked up not that long ago, and they know not to touch it. Oh yeah, and also we live in a super PC era now, so they know not to touch certain subjects.
Yeah,
and they also know that there are consequences for touching certain subjects, whereas before people just kind of, you know, wave it off.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I guess, too, that was like kind of that era where right before social media really took off, where it was like, how do you, like, because before social media took off, like, the way you promote yourself is you do need bad press, or you do need to be spoken about in some way in the media. And so that was kind of the big thing, was like, you do say an inflammatory joke to get the audience reaction, to get people to discuss you, to make it so there's more people who show up to your next show. I mean, Howard Stern kind of perfected that whole thing of, like, let's make it so offensive that, the people who hate me are going to be tuning in more than the people who like me.
Oh, yeah, it's the Floyd Mayweather effect where it's like, more people are watching because they don't like me. It's like, well, I'll make them not like me even more.
No, and you covered that really well, discussing the McGregor fight. And I guess that's the thing that's fascinating. See, like, we were just saying, you have a background in film. Mine's in journalism. And obviously I never did anything with it.
Hey, me too.
But what I will say is I carry with me is, like, I pay attention more to things involving journalism and things like that. And I think it's such a fascinating art because it's so bullshit. I mean, that's all the rage these days. Fake news, fake news. But studying it and seeing, like, where that's coming from, why people feel that way. Because, like, local news, like we've talked about, is, like, the perfect example of that, where it's just, like, shitty people got dressed up to look nice, talking about things, like, with the awful tone, like, it goes from super high, uplifting, look at this beautiful puppy, to 50 people were killed in this small town just outside the city. It's completely tone deaf. But yeah, and everyone looks pretty, and everyone's dolled up, and then everyone's really excited to talk about football. And, and then it was interesting because when I was in college, that's when you were seeing guys like Bill Simmons, who's one of my favorite sports journalists, who wasn't a journalist. He was just, he wrote, I'm the sports guy. I sit on my couch, I watch sports, and here are my observations. And that's what led to Alex Jones, Breitbart News. Like, that's what it is people are realizing, it's like, I can do this. I have the internet. Fuck it, And you're seeing now, like, Bill Simmons, like, he does have a successful podcast. He has a contract with HBO. He's not starving. He flamed out at ESPN because he got too full of himself and thought he was a big shot. And the corporation was like, we can make you disappear. And they did. And yeah, he had a short-lived show on HBO that flamed out horribly. And now he does the podcast and he has some, he's doing okay. And, I guess what's interesting is part of the reason he flamed out is because he got replaced by the next generation of people, guys who had more of a concept of, like, Twitter and, Snapchat. And
who are these guys?
Barstool Sports came about. There were a bunch of college kids that basically, I believe the first one, the main guy, El Prez, he started in Boston. Bill Simmons, that was kind of his whole thing.
So would Bleacher Report fall under this, or was that before?
Bleacher Report was the transitional. Bleacher Report I hate because that was the epitome of, like, why I didn't go into journalism. Because what happened with...
ruined it.
Well, yeah, because what they were doing, like, I actually worked with a kid who had just gotten his degree in journalism. From Wazoo, which is actually a great school for journalism. And he, basically, Bleacher Report, what they would do is they'd give him a byline, which is everything to a young writer, but they wouldn't pay him. And it's real easy to find a bunch of young, hungry college kids to write anything and everything about sports. Top 10 lists, garbage, just filler. Literally, it's a site of filler.
No, the moment you come to realize that about that site, it just completely destroys it for you.
So, in response to that, you have Barstool Sports, which were just like a bunch of guys who connected with one another in different major cities, and they would all bring their own thing. And sometimes they would basically be kind of a parody of what they were watching on the major sports sites. They would watch ESPN and then they would mimic it. Like, ESPN loves to do this inflammatory thing where they get, a really angry, loud black guy and a really angry, loud white guy, and they just yell at each other about sports issues. And really, it's just, back and forth, different, but they're totally disingenuous. They're just taking crazy ideas to make for an interesting argument. And these guys do it, but they do it with, like, a tongue-in-cheek, like, I'm just doing this because I know it pisses you off, which is a very, like, locker room type of conversation, which is vast majority of people who like sports. I never really followed them that closely because they like to post a lot of pictures of, like, naked college girls, basically, because they fall into that category, too. I mean, they built a brand. They're one of the highest rated sports sites, so... they know what they're doing.
Apparently.
To me, that's so, like, hacky and so just like, okay, like, that's a thing, but...
Hey, it worked for GoDaddy.
It's worked for a lot of things.
Worked for Miller Lite.
It's been working for wrestling, but
hey, women's wrestling is legitimate now.
it is. Yes, I wish that they could do it without, making them have fake tits and shit all the time. But
well, wait for Vince McMahon to die.
Yeah. No, exactly.
then you'll get that.
Exactly. That's what I'm waiting for. In the meantime, it's still kind of goofy.
They're halfway there. Maybe a third of the way.
But no, especially on like a sports site, like I don't want to log in and just be, have that thrust at me every single time. It's just kind of like, that just makes me rethink, why am I a sports fan? Like, no. I don't want to associate with this crap.
Well, what's funny to me about journalism is, I don't know about everyone else, but like for me, like I feel myself like skewing more towards like a personal voice.
Yeah.
Like take film critics for instance. Like used to be you had your Gene Shalit and your Roger Ebert and your Joe. Anyway, you had the big name critics and stuff. Everybody just kind of assumed that they knew what they were talking about. Leonard Maltin. It's like Leonard Maltin knows what he's talking about. So whatever he says is good is probably good.
Right.
At least on a superficial level. Nowadays though, with like internet and things like that, I feel like everything's fragmented to the point that we all kind of like latch on to our guy. Mm-hmm. Like it's not even the publication, it's the actual author. It's like you find some way to connect with that voice in particular, and you kind of treat them as you would a real friend of yours, where it's like, oh hey, this guy likes this, we kind of share similar interests, if he likes it, I'll probably like it.
Just like stand-up comedians who talk about their real day-to-day life, and if you have that moment, that aha moment of like, I can relate to this guy. Yeah,
and I think that's how a lot of journalism works too. Is like I don't know. It's like we're so spread out from each other that we're like looking for these strange ways of connecting. Where it's like you're a world away from this person, you'll never meet them unless you really go out of your way to. But somehow you subscribe to their brand in some way that it becomes like a reliable like source. Like it's like a mechanic almost, where it's like, oh, I got a brakes guy, or oh, I got a hydraulics guy.
No, it's so true, and that's the whole thing. And beyond that now, like you can follow said guy and get every tweet that they ever send out, and watch them on Facebook and Instagram how they live their life, and try to mimic it for yourself, and get horribly depressed when you realize that you're not always on vacation, or you can't afford to hire a professional photographer to take your photos staring over a cliff, or
stupid celebrities, why you gotta live life so good?
Well, and that goes back to too, it's like you're talking about people who already probably came from pretty decent means, and
I mean I'm putting that aside. Like I just think it's fascinating that like things like news, like things going on in the world and sports and things like that, like you can turn on the local news, or you can open a newspaper and it'll have an ungodly amount of information to present to you, but it's like it's unpalatable in some way, where it's like I don't want to know everything. I just want to know what I want it filtered. I want what I want, and I want it presented to me in a way that is engaging in some fashion. And I think that's why you see like Vice News and stuff, like everybody trusts them, like everybody like I'm not saying that in like a cynical way, like they are supposed to be a reputable news source. It's just, I think that style of presentation, like everything is an editorial to some extent. Yeah. Or an in-depth analysis of some sort, as opposed to just like traditional news anchor type news where it's just facts, things, no opinion. It's just, people are dead. I have no thoughts on the subject. What is the weather?
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's.
I feel like the people who are asking for unbiased news and stuff probably actually aren't.
Oh yeah.
I feel like everybody kind of wants a little bit of a spin, even if that's not what they're saying.
Well, I guess what I like about Vice, what they do is many of their shows that do well, they force you to see things that just most people don't care about. Yeah. And that's interesting to me. That was like the 60 Minutes thing too. Like when we were young, that was the big news show.
No, and 60 Minutes still does good product.
Right, but that's kind of their whole thing, is like, you need to be aware of this because it's something that will become important, or it is important to your day-to-day life. You just don't need to care about it because that's the life we live now.
Yeah.
It's like Vice will send a guy to go hang out on a farm. So you actually see what farmers do every day. You're eating their product literally every day if you live in America, but you know, most people are completely blind to what happens with their food and you know, processes of how these things go. And truth be told, they're usually pretty boring ass interviews.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, one of those things it's kind of important to be aware of. Otherwise, you know, you're just going to continue to get facts.
Yeah. No, they make good product. I've been impressed with some of their stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I like it too. And I think, you know, for the most part, I'm behind what they stand for. So I believe they're Canadian too. So
hey,
everybody
backs the Canadian.
Everyone likes Canadians.
Collateral Damage taught me that. It's like John Turturro's character in that. He's just like, yeah, they trust me because I'm Canadian. It's just like they let you mess with their machines and like do their mechanic work. It's like, yeah, they know I'm not going to do anything. It's like,
no, but I guess that's one of those things that, because of having that background, like when I watch TV, when I watch movies, I'm always trying to figure out like how did this person come up with this?
Yeah.
You know? So for me, that's why I get all these convoluted, crazy ass theories with these people.
No, so. I think it's important because it's how you engage with the story, where it's like anybody can veg out and just like watch moving pictures and hear sounds and, you know, take in what's being handed to them. But when you're actually thinking outside the frame, especially like in movies, like I think that's how you know you actually give a shit about what you're taking in.
Yeah.
And I think it's fun to play around with those things, and maybe not even with the intent of like trying to improve it, but just to explore different avenues. And I think that's the best thing a storyteller can do for themselves is ask questions.
Yes. Is
ask themselves questions. And I mean, I haven't done much writing lately, but like in the past, talking with my friend, like the thing that we would help each other out with all the time was we would try to explain what we're trying to do with the story or with a character, with a story arc or whatever. And the other person would respond by asking questions that the other person hadn't considered.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you're writing a story or you're filming a movie, either way, if you think in terms of like a movie or something,
yeah,
what you're seeing may be 2 hours long. What was shot, is hundreds of hours long. So to get to that point, there's a lot of decisions that had to be made by the director, by the editor, by the producers, by everybody. And it was, like I said, everything that you're seeing in the finished product was presented to you intentionally in some fashion. Like an actor's performance may have been spontaneous. Their motivation may have come from nowhere. They may have improvised their lines, but you have to factor in that the director decided to go with that take. The editor decided to let that take play out that long, decided to key in on those shots and at that focal depth or what have you.
Yeah.
And so there's just so many considerations that go into putting a story together. And I think the phrase I used was thinking outside the frame, thinking of like at the end of any movie you could consider, like thinking like you're Aziz Ansari, like thinking of where they're going to end up before they've gotten there.
Yeah.
Like thinking of the third season before it exists.
Yep. Like
thinking of what the characters are doing in the scenes that aren't shown to you.
Yeah.
I think that's how you create good storytelling, is knowing every dimension of the characters.
Well, I mean, I would argue that that's part of one of the most brilliant things I think that people hold on to from Star Wars. Was the fact that it started at episode 4, and everyone always had that in mind. Like when they watched it and were blown away by the original movies, was just holy crap! Like
there's stuff that happened before this.
Yeah, they thought it through, like beyond just what we're seeing, and that's like you were saying with Aziz. Like I truly feel that that's the case on that show. I
hope so. It sounds like he would be the type to consider that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just I haven't arrived at anything yet, but like that thought of like not peaking, like just always pushing and trying to get ahead, that very all-American value of, you know, believing in the next step and, you know, thinking beyond just like, this is what I have and, you know.
Well, I mean, that's the difference between like media franchises before and now is guys like William Shatner or Gene Roddenberry, like the Star Trek folks, basically.
Yeah.
Like any one of them, you know, have gotten any number of bizarre, off-the-wall questions at conventions and stuff, and they never have answers. It's because they never thought about it. They never, you know, there was no reason to think outside the box to that degree. But now I think all these like media franchise curators are under a lot of pressure to understand that, oh wait, everybody has these questions, not just the super nerds that, you know, show up at these conventions. Like, oh shit, we should probably ask those questions and have answers for them before they're asked.
Well, and it sounds like that's kind of the goal of the college you went to, that even though it was considered kind of off the wall and goofy, I think that encouraging that type of thinking rather than the type of university I attended, which was more, these are the rules, follow the rules, and you'll be successful kind of learning, where, you know, that's very much how it feels. And it does. It hurts you creatively to approach things like that, because then, you know, you do always feel like, oh my God, I've been given a show, like, you know, like, this is the best I'm ever going to do. Like, you know, you don't get that just a true creative landscape where you can just, anything that comes to mind, just give it a shot and believe in it, and you know, beautiful things can come of that.
Well, I mean, there's two different sides to that. I mean, like if you're trying to take ownership of your story, but you're doing it too aggressively, sometimes that's what can kill it. It's like if you, I fall victim to this. Like every fucking movie idea I've ever had is like, it's because of that goddamn Transformers the movie, the 1986 one, not the 2007 one. It's because of that. It's because there's so many amazing set pieces in that movie, and there's no fucking filler. It's just like nobody talks to each other in that movie. It's just like, spaceship fight. Oh, we blew up the spaceship. Oh, we're on a water planet with robots underwater. Oh, giant squid. Oh, Cup lost his leg. Oh, Cup got his leg back. Hey, wheelie! It's like, it just moves so fast from awesome moment to awesome moment, and it just stuck with me. And part of me believes that every story should be told in that fashion. But what I'm trying to say is that, like, as a storyteller, it's very easy to fall victim, like, especially in film, to, I don't know, crafting a set piece in your mind or a story beat or, like, a story arc and putting your foot down and saying, we are going to get here. It's like, you need to consider how to get there. It's like you can't go from A to C. You need to have a B. And I think sometimes storytellers fall victim to that, where it's like they just have this thing, that this one moment or this one scene that they just need to get in there, and they can't see the forest for the trees, where they overlook the minor detail. Like you always tell me about writing, it's the filler that makes it, actually.
I think too, like the other thing, I know what handcuffs me at least is also like fear that people will just, everyone knows your sources now.
Oh, yeah.
And that like you're not being creative. It's like a perfect example is Stranger Things. It's like I watched it, and it's an amazing show. I actually watched it in one sitting. Like, but if you break that show down like we did with like Aziz's show, it's literally Indiana Jones helps a bunch of kids like in that are literally like the perfect representation of the kids in E.T. deal with an it situation. You know, it's really one of the coolest things I can imagine, because it's all like these things from my childhood I love thrown together.
So G.I. Joes, they was out in the desert, and then holy shit, it's like Transformers showed up, and they joined forces to fight the Inhumanoids.
Yeah, and then you throw in this one, you throw in like, you know, a girl who has Akira basically, and then
does she have a choir backing her?
No,
damn.
no, but she's like kind of like the ET figure, and she like, you know, has a telekinesis and
well,
you know, and it's got a monster, and like I said, you got Indiana Jones punching people like left and right, like he's even wearing the hat. Like,
yes. See, I haven't seen this show. But...
And it's totally worth watching. It's amazing. But again, like I said, it's one of those things like the fear like I would have trying to write something like that, of just everyone, you know, immediate that doubt, like, oh, he's a hack. He just ripped off this, and that.
Yeah, one of the first things, well, I can't remember now, but like one of the things we covered talking in these podcasts is I like the idea of we're Japanese.
Yeah.
repetition does not bother me.
Yeah.
Telling the same story 1,000 goddamn times is how it's done.
Yeah.
That's how refinement gets done. That's how winning is done.
It's true.
I mean, Japanese culture is very much about the concept of refinement. It's about getting things down to their essence. It's about being able to...
Perfect.
Der order perfect. It's about being able to render a beautiful painting with a single stroke.
Yes.
Ideally. They never do it like that for real. But point is, the idea of having a similar package presented to you doesn't bother me, I think, as much as a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Like Under Siege and Die Hard.
Mm-hmm.
Die Hard is clearly the superior product. But I'm happy that Under Siege exists.
That's true.
And I haven't seen it, but Lockdown, I guess they got sued. They got sued because it was Lockout or Lockdown. It was Guy Pearce on a space station, and it was so similar to Escape from New York that they actually got sued and lost. So, but point is, I don't mind having the same story handed to me again and again and again, is because there are always differences, unless you're doing like a Gus Van Sant Psycho, where it's attempting to be exactly the same thing, just with shittier actors.
See, my whole thing is like, nobody strives to go out and be diet right. Like, nobody wants
Hey, don't badmouth Diet Right. I used to drink that shit.
But that's what I'm saying.
I would walk to fucking Walgreens just to get that shit.
I guess that's the hang-up, though, is like the fear.
Bad example.
The fear that you're going to be the Arby's of, like, you know?
Hey, everybody, where you want to go? I'm going to go to Arby's.
Yeah.
Nobody says that.
Exactly. It's the fear of failure, which
Like,
I
do you
think
want a Dr. Pepper or a Mr. Pibb? Clearly Mr. Pibb.
But I guess that's one of those things that fear of failure is always for anybody who tries to pursue creative works.
But look what happened with the Hunger Games.
That's true.
Very first fucking thing any hipster had to say about that was, oh, it's just Battle Royale. It's like, no! No, it's not! And I don't even have a high opinion of the Hunger Games. They are different things, but if you look at it in the broadest sense, yes, there are some similar themes going on there.
Yeah.
But like Stranger Things, you listed some bullet points. You know, Indiana Jones, Stephen King type shit, The Goonies.
Yeah, it's very much that.
But those are just bullet points. That's not
Yes.
the actual content moment to moment. Like, that's not the actual writing. That's not every shot in the movie. That's just you using shorthand to tell me things that I might like about this.
This is true.
But if I were to actually watch it, yeah, I'd probably see all those things, but I'm not watching those things. I'm watching an entirely unique product.
And this is why I was curious how you watch things, because like I said, we all have our different things that stand out when we take in a product like that, when we take in a journalist, when we take in anything, and it's how we, distill it down to what we think the essence of it is. And it's been a very enlightening conversation, actually, to see all that. It's very encouraging, actually, because it's getting over those hang-ups. That's part of the reason we do this, right?
Well, it sounds like you're winding down.
Yeah.
But before you do your winding down spiel, I have one nugget of information I want to throw your way.
Absolutely.
And this is all going to be you, because I have no opinion on the matter. But,
okay.
I was listening to a different podcast, and they were throwing out ideas for who could play the Joker.
Oh, damn.
I guess they're making a solo film for him.
Okay.
It's been greenlit. It's going to happen. But Paul Dano was listed as one of the people. Like, one of the people suggested Paul Dano, and
Who's
that? He was the young preacher from There Will Be Blood.
Okay.
He was the goofy friend to Joseph Gordon-Levitt in Looper.
Okay. Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about.
He was really good in Prisoners also.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he's an excellent actor, and I think he has a super wide range, and I think he would be great.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just happy. That has nothing to do with this. But the one guy threw out Marc Maron as the Joker. I'm curious what your thoughts on that would be, like how you could spin that.
Well, like the new one I've heard recently in the comics, at least, I think we talked about this before, but they were talking about doing point of view of the Joker being the protagonist and Batman's actually the antagonist. Where
see, I'm out of the loop.
So the idea is like Joker goes to Arkham and actually gets cured and gets meds. Ooh. And it's him kind of almost basically being a journalist, kind of observing that all these supervillains constantly come to Gotham to challenge Batman. And if Batman didn't exist, then the city would be fine. Okay. It's the reality of it is that you have this vigilante that's causing the problems.
So it's the Dark Knight theory of escalation.
Yeah,
so he gave way.
And I believe what ends up happening is he reaches a point where he stops taking his meds and he, goes off and just becomes this super dark figure again to try to kill Batman for the good of the city. Oh, I believe that's the direction they were going with that. I don't know. I haven't read it.
This is all news to me.
So, if you were going to do that kind of a take, that's the only way I could see a Marc Maron working out. Just because, he's so, gruff and all that, and that, to me, isn't really the Joker.
It's also very self-deprecating.
Yeah,
And Joker usually has some swagger about him.
Exactly. And so, in that sense...
At the same time, though, wouldn't that be interesting? Like a Joker that's less sure of himself?
Absolutely, but at the same time...
Or maybe a Joker that's in a transitional point where it's like he can see the madness in his thought patterns, where it's like there's a conflict going on.
Yeah, possibly.
I'm just curious because I know you're a big fan of the guy, and when the guy threw that out there, I was like, what?
Well, the other thing about it, though, too, is I don't know, Marc Maron's so kind of rooted in he just seems to be really focused on real world stuff. I don't know how well he'd take on a fantasy type of landscape like that. It's a very difficult notion, and I guess with the Joker, the big reason people hated the Jared Leto performance is he took it too far. He was too much of an asshole.
I kind of disagree. I think he did nothing with it.
Yeah,
he was a costume. He wasn't a performance.
Yeah,
it was all those promotional images when they first announced it. Mm-hmm. I think that was it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Even his acting was stifled by his dentures. You could barely understand him.
Yeah, I would agree with you. But that's kind of what I mean is by taking it too far, I feel like they thought they had the essence of the Joker down so much to the point where you didn't even really need to have anything there.
Well,
and I think
branding. I mean, if as long as you have a guy with green hair and white skin, people are going to know who he is and project onto him what needs to be there to sell that.
I guess too. I mean, that's a really fascinating thing, and to be honest, I haven't watched Glow, so I haven't seen really Maron acting outside of his. Yeah. And even in Glow, it sounds like the character he's playing is kind of just a parody of himself.
Okay.
And that to me, not to diss on the guy because I look up to him, but I really think that those are who he can be as an actor. He can always do something that's kind of an offshoot of himself and do it very well. But I don't really know if he would have a range to take on this psychotic figure.
What very little I know about the guy, I think if you were to seriously put that in front of him, he'd probably laugh at you.
Yeah.
And he'd probably just think you're an idiot.
I also
not that he's too big for it, just that you're a stupid producer if you think that this makes sense.
Well, and I think too so much of what he's about is not having to work more than he already is, unless it's something he's passionate about.
That makes
because
sense.
That's the thing too, is you have to understand that this guy's a successful comedian where he literally does a show out of his garage. That's an ideal life for him. And yeah, he'll do things like Glow because it's an opportunity to showcase himself, but I think he also did that because Netflix gave him a stand-up special.
There's your cross-promotion shit.
Right. And so that's kind of one of those things where it's I think that he has an ideal life, really. I think he really loves podcasting. I think that he gets all these great, interesting, celebrities to come on, and he really is kind of in awe of them. That's part of why the interviews are so great, because he's just amazed that they would even take the time with him. And so I don't necessarily know if he'd want to get that big.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I think his big thing is just I'm just happy as is. I'll do enough to pay the bills, but, he doesn't have a family. He doesn't have, he doesn't really have a lot to worry about beyond his own life. So, You know who honestly came to mind though when you presented that? Who, if he had it in him, and this becomes an issue of like we were talking about with Neill, was it Blomkamp?
Yeah.
If the guy was willing to do the work and actually take on the role, the person who's most qualified in Hollywood to do this role justice, to me...
Leo DiCaprio.
No.
Damn.
Close. Johnny Depp. Because...
Especially where he's at right now.
Well, he's already confirmed he's psycho, but beyond that, he... You know, yeah, he was this guy, pretty boy guy, but he obviously hates that because every role he has, he's covering his face up. He's obstructing himself.
Yeah, there's a theme throughout his body of work.
That's what I'm saying, though, is he already has the overly eccentric, you know, behavior. He already understands, like, madness. Like, and it could be a career, you know, saving move, basically, honestly.
You know, I don't think you're off. I don't think you're off at all suggesting that, because when I think about it, it's like, I don't know how much, like, desire there is to branch out at this point, because I know he likes inhabiting characters, but for a while there, his primary interest seemed to be like more colorful, bouncy stuff because he had little kids and stuff.
Yeah,
like that's where the whole Pirates of the Caribbean thing kicked in, and like Dark Shadows, where he's, you know, a silly character, like a colorful one. But other than, like, I can't recall many where he intentionally played like repulsive or just unlikable characters. Like
Sweeney Todd, I guess. Like,
that was a musical. He was, you know, everyone was made up a certain way.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
He is, you know, a foul person, but he's also the framing device of it. He's the protagonist, so you're meant to follow him throughout the whole story. But like, other than like, what was it, Secret Window, like parts of that, he was supposed to be kind of a jerk, but you know, kind of evil. But
that's what I'm saying, though, is like, I think he's at a stage in his career where he's like, he would be like the ultimate kind of like beautiful failure, kind of like just like I said, like his career's kind of falling apart. Like he's opinion of the guy's pretty low, but he could, I think that's the person who could channel that the best and really give like a standalone Joker feature, like, you know, a guy who kind of walked around with bravado in his day-to-day life until something just went really, really wrong, and then he just lets it all loose, and he could be terrifying.
No, I can see it. I mean, I can totally see it, and I would not I would not write him off. I mean, he's made a lot of money for a lot of people. I'm sure Warner Brothers is cognizant of that fact, and clearly they want as many big name stars as they can to headline these things. But it's funny, one of my coworkers, first name that came to his mind was Michael Wincott. See, that's not a household name. That's one that I had to Google, but as soon as you see his face, you're like, oh, that guy. The Crow, the villain from The Crow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he had the guy that smoked 20 packs a day.
He's like, still around, huh?
Yeah, I don't think he's acting much anymore, but like in his prime, like even in Alien Resurrection, there's some shots in that where he's lit, where he has kind of a you know, a knowing grin on his face when he's drinking with Dan Hedaya, Dan Hedaya. Love that guy. But it's like, wow, this light and shadows love this guy's face. He has a very distinctive voice. He did a lot of, like, I think he did like Three Musketeers and like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves and stuff. So he's, you know, had a theatrical background. So he's big on like costuming and things like that. So I could, you know, in his prime, I think he would have been perfect. Unfortunately, Batman was entering the Joel Schumacher era around the time his career was getting rolling. So no, we don't want, you know, grumpy faced, gravelly voiced guy from The Crow. We want whatever the fuck. We want colors. We want Jim Carrey. But yeah, I thought that was interesting because that was a name and a face that I hadn't thought of in a while. But I was like, you know, I've only seen him in a few things, but he's always stuck out.
I think, yeah. I mean, that's not a bad choice.
I mean, at that moment in time. Yeah. I mean, he is very much a moment in time kind of guy.
Yeah.
From like 1990 to like 1994 or something. And by the time Alien Resurrection happened, it's like, hey, you're done. It's like, there's a reason you left the movie in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting take too. I like that.
No, I was just curious to hear what you had to say about Maron, because to me that seemed like a gag answer. Like that seemed like a non-answer, but I was just curious if you could put it together. It sounds like there's basically no way that would work.
Well, again, it depends. Like I said, it's some people don't need, to be bigger and bigger all the time, and some people do, and who knows? Like it took him forever to get famous, so sometimes those are the people who want to keep building and building once they finally get their shot.
Well, the one point that the guy did emphasize, like actually seriously, was that he did comment on the fact that Marc Maron did have a checkered past, and a lot of comedians do have a darkness to them because a lot of them have to look at themselves in the mirror a little more closely than most people in order to bring that material to the surface. Yeah. So I think that's the point he was trying to drive, that this is a guy who has something he can tap into, but truthfully I don't know that the guy's actually an actor. I think he's just a guy that can tell funny stories and has lived a lot of life.
Yeah. Again, like I said, if they were to go the route that the comics seem to be going in, maybe, because that could be fascinating, because he does talk like a guy who's spent years and years of his life in therapy.
Yeah, he does talk like someone who talks to himself a lot.
Yeah, but again, like, I don't necessarily know if he could. Well, I mean, the other thing is too, honestly, and I was thinking this when we mentioned Johnny Depp. Yeah. But I'd worry what the performance would do to the guy.
Oh, yeah.
Because the big thing with Maron, like I know he could do Glow because the character he's kind of representing, he lived that life similarly. Like, just like coke fiend, loud, angry, evil person kind of. Yeah. Well, I don't even know if he's evil. Again, I haven't watched it, but just like cranky, like, It's like one thing to do it because you're like kind of making a parody of it for fun and entertainment.
Oh, that's another form of therapy.
But to actually try to take that on, because he's going to give 100% to try to do a role like the Joker as well as possible. I don't know if he wants to go back there, man.
Yeah, I think.
And that's what I was thinking with Johnny Depp too. Is like I think he would give the performance of a lifetime. I think it also may kill him, because.
Good point.
I don't believe the Heath Ledger thing so much, that like he got so dark from studying the role that I think he just popped pills and drank too much.
Yeah, I think he was.
Which I understand it. Let him go out with dignity. I don't fault them for that, but with Depp, I feel like he's a guy who's already walking that line, and to give him a role where he is basically encouraged to throw chairs like out windows and be as fucking horrible as he wants to be to anyone and everyone, like
yeah, that'd probably be self-destructive.
Yeah, so
but again, like you said, probably would get the performance of a lifetime.
Yeah, or he'd just phone it in, which is the other, again, it goes to risk management.
Given the way Warner Brothers has been managing their films as of late, yeah, that's probably what you'd get. Yeah, because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of confidence on anyone. Like, yeah.
All right. Well, at that point, I'm exhausted. So
as am I.
But thank you for giving me a moment of tapping into your brain, and yeah, as always, it's very encouraging, and look forward to the next one.
Yeah, we should do it sooner.
Yep. And for all of those out there, thank you so much for listening.
You wouldn't hit a guy with glasses on, would you? Huh?